All right. Hi, guys. So today I just kind of wanted to go over with you the different passages that you're going to use to answer this week's reading response, which is an essay question. So remember, this isn't a two-sentence response. This is a well thought out paragraph where you use details from the text to support your answer. So this week, your essay question has to do with how Zero and Stanley's relationship evolves throughout this story. It's very similar to like the character descriptions that we did in Esperanza Rising, where you look back at people's characters throughout the book and you describe how they change or how they don't change. You describe that character development. But in this case, you're not just going to describe one character like we did in Esperanza Rising, where we talked about Esperanza being kind of spoiled in the beginning, but how she grows over time and becomes a more responsible and caring person. In this instance, you're going to talk about two people. So you're going to describe Stanley and Zero's relationship and how it evolves. Because if you think about it, this is a really odd friendship. And I would definitely call it a friendship, reading the past chapters this week where Stanley actually goes after Zero and tries to save him. But it's not the kind of friendship that you see a lot in young readers' books where two people meet and they know that they're friends right away. This is an odd relationship. It's definitely it definitely like is unlikely. It's special because it kind of develops over time and they're not friends right off the bat. So the first page that I wanted you to look at was page 21. So I'm going to go up a little bit further and then we're going to read through and kind of just talk through these different passages and what's going on here. So 21 is back towards the beginning of the book. So this is right after Zero and Stanley have first met. 22. Okay. So here we've got Stanley writing to his mom. Dear Mom, today was my first day at camp and I've already made some friends. We've been out on the lake all day. I'm pretty tired. Once I pass the swimming test, I'll get to learn how to water ski. He stopped writing as he became aware that somebody was reading over his shoulder. He turned to see Zero, standing behind the couch. I don't want her to worry about me, he explained. Zero said nothing. He just stared at the letters with a serious, almost angry look on his face. Stanley slipped it back into the stationery box. Did the shoes have a red X's on the back? Zero asked him. It took Stanley a moment, but then he realized Zero was talking about Clyde Livingston's shoes. Yes, they did, he said. He wondered how Zero knew that. Brand X was a popular brand of sneakers. Maybe Clyde Livingston made a commercial for them. Zero stared at him for a moment, with the same intensity with which he had been staring at the letter. Stanley poked his finger through a hole in the vinyl couch and pulled out some of the stuffing. He wasn't aware of what he was doing. Come on, caveman, dinner, said Armpit. So here, Stanley and Zero, they're not really friends, and you can kind of tell by that. It's not like they're like having this really fun moment together. It's more they're just getting to know one another. Zero's staring. There's something very mysterious about Zero. And so like Stanley's kind of trying to figure him out here. So let's skip forward to page 26. Kind of look at what happens up here. Okay. So then here we've got Mr. Pendatsky, he's asking Stanley a question. Well, let me tell you something, caveman. You are here on account of one person. If it wasn't for that person, you wouldn't be here digging holes in the hot sun. You know who that person is? My no-good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather? The other boys howled and laughed at her. Even Zero smiled. It was the first time Stanley had ever seen Zero smile. He usually had such an angry expression on his face. Now he had a huge smile. It almost seemed too big for his face, like the smile of a jack-o'-lantern. So here is like this little moment where you're like, Maybe Zero's starting to like Stanley, and Zero doesn't really seem to interact with anyone else, but Stanley made him laugh, made him smile. And that's kind of these little moments build on top of one another to create a friendship. Like I said, it's not like they meet and they're like, oh, you're cool. Yeah, you're cool too. And we'll be friends. No, it's a very gradual building on a relationship. Let's get forward to page 34. Okay. Dear Stanley, it was wonderful to hear from you. So Stanley's reading a letter from his mother. Your letter made me feel like one of the other moms who can afford to send their kids to summer camp. I know it's not the same, but I'm very proud of you for trying to make the best of a bad situation. Who knows? Maybe something good will come of this. Your father thinks he is real close to a breakthrough on his sneaker project. I hope so. The landlord is threatening to evict us because of the odor. I feel sorry for the little old lady who lived in a shoe. It must have smelled awful. Love from both of us. What's so funny? Zero asked. It startled him. He thought Zero had gone to dinner with the others. Nothing, just something my mom wrote. What'd she say? Zero asked. Nothing. Oh, sorry. Well, see, my dad's trying to invent a new way to recycle old sneakers, so the apartment kind of smells bad because he's always cooking these old sneakers. So anyway, in the letter, my mom said she felt sorry for the little old lady who lived in a shoe. You know, because it must have smelled bad in there. Zero stared blankly at him. You know, the nursery rhyme? Zero said nothing. You've heard the nursery rhyme about the little old lady who lived in a shoe. No. Stanley was amazed. How does it go? Asked Zero. Didn't you ever watch Sesame Street? Stanley asked. Zero stared blankly. Stanley headed to dinner. He would have felt pretty silly reciting nursery rhymes at Camp Green Lake. So now here we've still got kind of that mysterious thing going on with Zero. Stanley's wondering, what kid hasn't watched Sesame Street before or doesn't know the nursery rhyme about a little old lady who lived in a shoe? Because this book is written more for my generation, it's a little bit older. I don't know if many of you have watched Sesame Street, but it was an old TV show that had a lot of nursery rhymes on it, including that one. And it was very big. It was something everybody watched growing up. So this mystery thing is kind of like building. And we're also seeing Zero interact with Stanley more and more. Let's skip forward to page 36. So now Stanley is writing back to his mom and dad. Dear Mom and Dad, camp is hard but challenging. We've been running obstacle courses and have to swim long distances to the lake. Tomorrow we learn. He stopped writing as Zero walked into the tent, then returned to his letter. He didn't care what Zero thought. Zero was nobody. So right here, that's a really important sentence. He stopped writing as Zero walked into the tent, then returned to his letter. He didn't care what Zero thought. Zero was nobody. This is how Stanley feels about Zero right now. Remember, Stanley is the person whose point of view this book is from. So we get a lot of insight there. Now, in our latest chapter, when Stanley goes after Zero, I don't think that this feeling right here would hold true. That is not how Stanley feels about Zero anymore. So what we want to look at is what happened in these chapters that made Stanley go to the point where he would run out into a desert to save Zero when towards the beginning of the book, he thought of Zero as a nobody. So that's a really great piece of evidence that you could use to compare how Stanley and Zero were at the beginning of the book, how their relationship was, to how their relationship is now. I want to look at a couple more things, so I'm going to skip ahead. What we do know is on some of these pages right here, Zero starts asking if Stanley can teach him how to read and write. And then on page 42, I know that this is when the sunflower seeds are stolen and Stanley is taken away to the warden's office and she scratches Mr. Sir's face, which was kind of a scary scene. But when Stanley comes back on page 42 from the warden's office, he finds, let's see, right here, he finds that his his hole is like partially dug. So he comes back. Since he'd taken the blame for the sunflower seeds, he realized the boys had dug the hole for them. Hey, thanks, he said. Don't look at me, said X-Ray. Confused, Stanley looked around from magnet to armpit to zigzag to squid, and none of them took credit. Then he turned to Zero, who had been quietly digging in his hole since Stanley returned. Zero's hole was smaller than all the others, so he realized that Zero, while he was gone, had dug part of his hole for him. And then, over here, they start to talk about Zero and Stanley go to their tent, and he thanks Zero, and he asks, why'd you help me? You didn't steal the sunflower seeds. So neither did you. And Zero looks at him and said, you didn't steal the sneakers. Stanley said nothing. So now you can tell, I think Zero's kind of liking Stanley. You don't dig a hole for someone that you don't like, right? So there you start to see an example of, this would be a perfect example of how Zero feels about Stanley, right? That's evidence right there that Zero cares about Stanley, because you don't go digging holes in the hot sun for someone you don't like. Then on pages 42 through 44, we see Zero start to be taught by Stanley. So Stanley's starting to teach him, and this is obviously bringing them together more, and he's going to start digging holes for him. But I would say the big one that I want to look at before we go is it's either 53 or 59. So here is where, let's see, page 53. So here we have, after Stanley taught Zero the final 6 letters of the alphabet, he taught him to write his name, capital Z-E-R-O. Zero wrote the letters as Stanley said them. Zero, he said, looking at the piece of paper. His smile was too big for his face. So Zero is smiling really big. Stanley's teaching him. He's able to spell his name, and he feels really happy. So I would say they're becoming closer friends. Stanley watched him write it over and over again. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. In a way, it made him sad. He couldn't help but think that 100 times 0 was still nothing. You know, that's not my real name, Zero said as they headed to the rec room for dinner. Well, yeah, Stanley said. I guess I knew that. He had never really been sure. Everyone's always called me Zero, even before I came here. Oh, okay. My real name is Hector. Hector? Stanley repeated. Hector Zeroni. So Zero doesn't talk to anyone much, but he just shared a really personal fact with Stanley. This is another great piece of evidence on how Zero feels about Stanley. You wouldn't share your real name with someone that you didn't trust or think of as a friend. And then on page 59, I'm not going to go ahead to it, but that is when Stanley gets in the fight, and Zero ends up pulling, I think it's X-Ray or Zigzag off of Stanley and saving him. And that's when Zero runs away. And now we have Zero and Stanley stranded together in a desert. So you guys have lots and lots of information. The author does a really, really good job of showing how this relationship builds over time. And I want you guys to kind of describe that. So because we can't have an open discussion about this, I'm kind of helping give you the answer. This is not a quick friendship. This is one that builds over time. And I want you to describe, how is their relationship at the start of the book, and how does it develop over time? You're going to describe that to me and use text evidence, so copying and pasting from the PDF into your answer. Remember, this is not 2 sentences. This should be a very well thought out paragraph, complete sentences. Use your wrap, so restate the question, answer the question, prove it with evidence from the text, and then tie it together with your own thoughts, okay? Let me know if you guys need help. I hope that you have a great week.